to do so, we're actually going to monitor this for changes depending on if it moves more so towards land or more south over the open water. That will actually change the trajectory of this storm. Right now, let's take a look at what we're seeing from a wide point of view. First of all, I want to make sure we're on the right radar, and we are. But this Slidell site, like I mentioned, has actually moved currently, and that's why you're seeing the radar not present on this particular site. So what we're going to do is spread it out a little wider, and I'll show you what's actually going on there. This particular site was moved further to the north to give us a better vantage point here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast when it comes to severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. It's actually going to shoot at, I believe, what is a 0.2 angle from that radar, and that means that it's going to be that far off the ground rather than about 400 feet in some locations across the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But let's go back home on this particular cell, and you'll see the whole part of the viewing area when I add in that radar once again is actually under a decent threat for severe weather through the afternoon. What we initially thought was rather slow. What happened? Okay, making sure we're up. That's good. All right, continuing to see this whole system progress into the severe direction towards the afternoon hours, just south of Waveland. Like I mentioned, that storm continuing. And I've stepped off screen at the moment just to kind of center up the radar here and make sure we get our imagery back up. And what we're going to look at here is initially your reflectivity values, and those reflectivity values continue to show a decent setup for this storm. It's a little ragged, like I mentioned, because of the location of the radar. Now, if we take off the severe thunderstorm warning, you'll notice, according to the National Weather Service at this particular point, they're going to say the survey team is out across the state looking at storms from last night, but as of now, their main focus is on storms for today. And what we're looking at is that storm with the dangerous potential for some rotation to the south of our viewing area. And according to the Weather Service right now, what we're looking at, if it'll refresh, they're continuing to monitor this storm for broad rotation, and it's actually going to expire the tornado warning down to the south of our viewing area. But before we let you go back to your regular programming, I do want to refresh you on what's going on here. This is just to the far southern areas of Hancock County, and we'll spread this out a little wider so you can take a look at the viewing area as a whole. And what you're going to notice is it's really in the bottom part of Hancock County, just to the south, and this whole system is moving towards the east. And as it does so, it's going to move decently quickly, but not as quickly as we're used to seeing these particular storm systems move on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And last night, as we continued to see this storm move through, what you're going to see is the whole system move towards the east at a slower clip than normal for this time of year, but actually a decently quick storm compared to what we're going to see later on in the spring. And what I mean by that is our storm system continues to move in the easterly direction with those winds continuing to show a little bit of broad rotation. And as that's the case, that's why the National Weather Service has dropped the tornado tag. But the reason we're staying with this at the moment is because it was just dropped, and these storms sometimes, as we saw last night with the storms to our north and west, they like to do what we call cycle. And as the storms continue to cycle, sometimes it'll look like you're losing that rotation, and the rotation will get weaker, but as a whole, the storm will start to cycle and reform a core, and that core will actually drop sometimes a newer circulation and a newer tornado. But not quite sure that there was a tornado on the ground, but we did see it was confirmed most likely by a storm spotter. And keep in mind, to confirm these tornadoes on the ground, these storm spotters have to go through training directly from the National Weather Service. And so if the storm was confirmed by a spotter, they believe wholeheartedly most of the time, 99% of the time, that they've seen what they believe is a tornado on the ground. But I want to reiterate this storm down further to the south, and I'll put it in motion for you at the moment. As you can hear the thunder continuing to roar behind me over the WXXV studios here. But what I'll do is put it in motion over the last couple minutes and see if you can see for yourself where the storm is headed and where it's going over the next couple minutes. So I'll do that decently quickly as we add in this particular motion here. It's about 30 minutes to 15 minutes. I'll put it in motion for about 30 minutes here and step off to the right, and you can see where that tornado warning was issued. And I'll take off this severe thunderstorm watch right here. I'll step off the screen and do that for you and click on the computer. First of all, the red box you saw on your screen was a tornado warning, and then when it went purple, that's when we were referring to the tornado warning being confirmed. Still not quite sure if it was exactly a spotter, but most likely a storm spotter was who confirmed that to be on the ground, because the National Weather Service in Slidell continues to focus on many storm cells that are moving through the area at the moment. But continuing onward into the afternoon, areas like Gulfport and Biloxi most likely going to be somewhat close to this storm as it's moving almost due east there. I'm going to stop the motion now and just make it current, because you can see to the north a lot of these cells up. I'll actually draw it out for you here with the pencil tool. A lot of these storms up to the north continue to be pushed down towards our area, and remember that frontal system is going to drop down towards the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and as it does so, our severe potential will follow this particular trend out the door, but that's not going to happen until later on this evening. Notice the directional pattern of that arrow I drew, and that's of course a relative term there depending on the direction of the storm. The cold front's going to drop down, it's going to move through this area, and to the north of the cold front up here, that's where you have all that colder air, but the colder air will actually act to diminish the severe potential for areas behind the front. But what that's going to do is, as it's pushing downward, it's actually going to provide quite a bit of lift for the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And as it provides that lift, that's why we're seeing some of these thunderstorms develop. I'm actually going to take you back very quickly. I just want to briefly move towards the future track and show you why this is happening, just to give you a brief idea of what's occurring here, and I'll get that for you momentarily. Meaning the cold front that I talked about last night. Remember, you need several ingredients for severe weather development. It's called shear, lift, instability, and moisture. We know as the SLIM acronym. Shear is the turning of winds with height. Lift, you need some lift in the atmosphere, a lifting mechanism. Instability, and moisture. And the lift here is coming directly from that cold front, as you'll see momentarily. Lynx is actually loading up the future tracker that I have pulled up here on my screen. But momentarily, you'll see that cold front, and finally here it is. It's actually going to continue to drop down into the area. And you see those reds and blues corresponding on your particular frontal system. And what that is the frontal boundary has actually begun to stall out in areas to our west. This boundary is actually keeping a lot of the moisture down here to the south. And as that happens, that moisture will be retained across our area. Not only going to provoke some rain chances over the next day to day and a half, but also going to provide that abundant moisture for some of these storm systems until the frontal system clears out of our area. But as of now, what you're seeing is that front continuing to push south, as I drew out with that arrow moments ago, and as it does so, it's going to continue in its southeasterly direction, and with it, it's going to eventually clear the area, and that cold air behind it will be allowed to move across the Mississippi Gulf Coast, taking with it the rest of our severe potential. But as of now, that boundary is still more so towards the north, and as it is, that's when we'll see that severe potential continue. We mentioned last night that the severe potential is rather low, but the ingredients are there. Just because it's low doesn't mean you won't see something happen, and that's what we've already seen today. Just around the 1:30 time frame, that's when we finally saw things start to crank up. It's almost like you have ingredients for something to occur, and you're looking, and it may not be quite likely. It's like you're a long shot in a basketball game. You've got a few players that are great. Just because you're not as talented as the other team doesn't mean that you couldn't pull off the upset with the right setup and the right play. And that's what's happening here across the Mississippi Gulf Coast with this particular setup for thunderstorms. We do have the ingredients, and rather low. We do have some shear, lift, instability, and moisture. So you have the big four, and if you have the big four, you put them together in the right atmosphere, and it will absolutely produce what you're looking for. And that's why you're seeing this frontal system provide that right now. But before we send you back to programming, I quickly want to take one more look at the storm and give you the latest from the National Weather Service, and then we'll let you return to your regular scheduled programming. And of course, we'll cut in again if a tornado warning is issued. So here's the current setup for those thunderstorms. I'll put it into motion one more time and show you where this storm is headed, and then you'll be back to your regularly scheduled programming here at the WXXV studio. That severe thunderstorm warning for marine areas to the south, mainly of Hancock County now, moving towards the east, will continue to move east over the next hour. It's going to provide quite a bit of wind, maybe some flash flooding potential, but you see the arrow that I still have drawn on the screen. Above, the arrow pointing north is the cold air, and to the south is the area just where you can see that severe potential throughout the rest of the afternoon. And one more look at that. I'll give you one or two more scans, and then we're going to send it back to regularly scheduled programming. It looks like we're going to see things continue. I've got about 2 more minutes with you before you go back to your regularly scheduled programming. But apparently we do have some damage by the railroad tracks by the Louisiana-Mississippi border. That's not completely confirmed yet, but it came from social media, and it appears that the person that operates the bridge for the railroad company is the person that relayed that information. So obviously we've seen some severe weather occur already out there with the initiation of the warning. The Weather Service obviously wouldn't issue that warning unless they felt it was direly necessary there. But speaking of severe weather, not just looking at tornado warnings and tornado watches, you're actually looking for some of the severe capabilities in terms of straight line winds, damaging winds, hail, flash flooding. Now, damaging winds is something that often gets forgotten across the entirety of the weather community. You have winds blowing at 90 miles an hour straight or 90 miles per hour in a gate-to-gate wind shear for a tornado. Either way, that's still 90 mile per hour winds, and it will cause damage across the area. And we've already seen that with that report of damage at the Louisiana-Mississippi border. Thankfully, though, the majority of damaging storms now moving more towards the east and will continue to do so over the next couple hours. But we'll see those storms come in from the north. These storms here could provide more of a threat depending on if they congeal into a linear state or if they break up into their own individual cells. But some of these cells to the south are more individual, and that's why we're starting to see some of those problems with that uninterrupted inflow from those storms. So I'm being told I have about 1 more minute with you, so we'll give you one more brief overview of the storm here before we send you back to programming. According to the Weather Service, once again, we do have confirmed damage from that person that operates the bridge for the railroad company, and they're going to take a look at that. The Weather Service will be out there to take a look and see what kind of damage that was, and that's what they do after these events. Of course, they'll wait till thunderstorms have passed, and they'll continue to evaluate whether that was straight line wind damage or tornado damage. As of now, the storms to the south still keeping that severe thunderstorm warning as the winds are decently quick. Storms to the north are what we're going to monitor over the next few hours, but either or, whether you find yourself right along the coast or to the northern parts of the viewing area, stay weather aware, and we'll keep you updated, and we'll cut in if we need. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.